Um, I know I'm always looking into the past and stuff, and I think we might have covered this briefly on the other show, but there was this restaurant near the airport called the Buggy Whip. I think you know about it, right? And I think it was built in the 1950s. Um, it's sort of like one of these old school restaurants where there's this piano bar player and there's a little big glass jar at the top of his piano, and you give him dollars or $5 or 10, and he plays songs for you and stuff like that. Uh, I don't know who in the 50s, but in the mid 70s, people still like that style, that old school red velvet booth. Um, tossed salad. They had this dressing called Green Goddess dressing that they invented for their own, with a great mix of like anchovies and oh, I forget, I forget what else, but it was great. And the owner was Paul I never get his name right. His name is Paul de Carrere, and he was a chef here in Pasadena, and he owned a restaurant called Chez Paul in the 60s and 70s. And then he bought this place, the Buggy Whip, in the 70s, like 76, and he kept it running. So around 90, I think like 95, 96, I came by because you'd always drive, like, the route home from the airport would be too crowded always. So I'd always take the side streets, and you couldn't help but miss this restaurant because it had the old elegant sign that looked like it was from, bygone day. You saw these old school Cadillacs parked in front. I don't think there was a valet, but you know what I mean. It looked like, think of like the Regal Beagle for Three's Company. Jack Tripper's hangout. It was kind of like that, but very plush. Um, because at that time, technically, this falled in the area of Inglewood. Inglewood's a very affluent neighborhood in the 60s, because Hughes Aircraft, and who else was it? Not Boeing. Northrop? Northrop, yeah, maybe Lockheed, I'm not sure. They all had their
Lockheed.
bases in, not bases, but they had big plants in El Segundo. So I think this restaurant was there to service the people leaving on trips as well as like the local people. And Paul was also a seafood importer, uh because I remember that he was shipping stuff out of Florida. So like on the menu, there'd always be these amazing like stone crab claws. You crack them and greatest thing ever. And their specialty was the prime rib of beef, and it was just excellent. And the waiters were great. The servers, they know how to make the right drinks, just the right amount, not too stiff, not too weak. Um, and I think one of my favorite waiters, he actually was also waiting tables or serving at another luxurious, what do you call it, the old school hangout in Palm Springs called Wally's Desert Turtle. I don't know if that's related to like the Velvet Turtle, but it was called Wally's Desert Turtle, and that's really upscale. If you go to like Palm Springs, it's a very upscale restaurant, incredibly expensive. I've only been there once, but the clientele, it's all of these, these generation, people born in the 50s and 40s, and they hang out and they like to eat and get together. And Palm Springs is a very small community. I mean, it's all connected to Rancho Mirage and Desert Hot Springs and Indian Wells. Not Desert Hot, but Indian Wells, and then Palm Springs itself, and then yeah, um, and there's golf courses and that stuff. So it's a very sociable thing. And this restaurant is like a place. It was like kind of a place for locals to hang out and meet each other. And then there's this other place called the oh no, it's got the green awning. I forget the sign. Anyway, well, getting back to the Buggy Whip, yeah, it was great because whenever I'd have a birthday, I'd say, I want to go to the Buggy Whip, Mom. I want to go. And it was just a great time, to the extent that I'd then do business meetings there, and people liked the vibe. Unfortunately, as things changed over time, he got older, Paul, and he retired. I think he probably was 80 when he retired, and he sold off the restaurant. And there's a reason why these restaurants last as long as they did. Everyone thinks that they could just take a hold of something and be successful. And the restaurants is something that definitely you don't, it's not what you think, because there's a lot of things involved, intricate. There's a lot of work, there's a lot of pain and suffering, and a lot of it goes unnoticed. Basically you're putting your efforts in to see what's on the plate, and if the diner's loving the coming back, that's the biggest thank you you could ever do. So anyway, he sold it, and he sold it to an investor uh who'd never run restaurants before. And there's a side story. What I think, there's a theory I have regarding what was going on, but I believe it might not have been a very sound financial transaction that happened. And pretty soon, a year and a half, the restaurant was closed. It had gone to the ground. And so a lot of that brought up a lot of questions in my mind as to the circumstances of that. Like, was this planned? I'm not saying any guilt thing on Paul, of course not. Talking about the buyers, because I noticed, saw a decline in quality, decline in the food, decline of the service. They started charging valet, which was unheard of for that, because there's a huge parking lot. Everyone had a spot, never had the valet. Uh, so it's gone, and this is about like maybe 2014, 2015, and it's gone, never to be heard of since. And then it sort of led me to this path of thinking, like, other restaurants that are no longer here on this earth, so to speak, and their circumstances, you know, um, and how things are changing, and how the culture's changing so fast that it doesn't have time to adapt to a buggy whip. Now, why did I like the buggy? Why did I discover it? Because I was only 20 something, right? And I could have totally given my time and life to pop culture if I wanted to, but yet I picked this very old school restaurant. I even had the piano player play Barry Manilow for me, and Tony Bennett songs, and uh, it was great. And the martinis were good too. But why would something like that existed for, let's say, 50, 60 years, suddenly just go kaput? And that just tells you that the generational gap, for some reason, for some reason, we're handing on these traditions, but the new generations don't care. And as a result, we're losing a lot of the culture that's inherent, a lot of culture that the immigrants brought to I mean, brought to this country. And then, particularly as I speak for the Los Angeles area, Southern California, what they brought to it. And so leads me to the next point, which is that the fact that we know that the Jewish deli is in an existential crisis right now. We know that we know that the venues, who's ever left, they're struggling. They're struggling. There, for example, like, there's Langer's, which I consider to be the best pastrami in Los Angeles, combination with the bread and the meat, and the meat. And they're struggling. They were built in 1940, I think, and it's been a family business ever since then. Um, but they're struggling, and they were built straight in the middle of Lafayette Park. So if you know what's happened, what's happened there. I mean, it looks like historically for 50 years, or ever since it was built, that park's been dangerous, and it's been a risk, and everybody says, "Oh, don't worry, it's safe. You can walk through it. We've got this patrolled." Well, no, they don't. They don't. They didn't. I think they found a dead body in the lake like last year or 2 years ago, something like that. So they don't. And so now you have this great pastrami, this great Jewish jelly right in the heart of this, and they, half their clientele has passed away, and then the new generation hasn't caught on to that type of food, the tradition of what it meant to break bread, you know, gossip, trade ideas, rekindle friendships, and do all that stuff. And it was a communal experience, so much that when you go to these delis, you know what I'm talking about, because Nate Nell's in Beverly Hills, which is another great deli, by the way. They have those dividers, remember, and it slides up and down, so you could block your face if you want to cover your conversation. But most of the time, it's always down because people like to be part of a conversation, to give their input, to listen in, to help each other, in a positive way, be meaningful, nothing nefarious. And you contrast that in today's world where nobody trusts each other, everybody believes everyone's a liar. They don't even know they're being told what to believe. They're being told that this is not a hand, this is a foot, stuff like that. So the traditions aren't being handed down from culture from generation to generation in these cultures. Now the Hispanic culture, for the most part, they have been able to successfully hand down at least the art of cuisine down to generations, and quinceaneras and fiestas and those events. But it's really disappointing and heartbreaking to see that the Jewish deli is having such major trouble. We lost Greenblatt's. They were on Sunset Boulevard. They were a fantastic, fantastic deli. Um, there was a chain. I mean, say what you will about them, but I admire them. There was a chain called Jerry's Deli, and they had 4 locations here across the valley, and I would just hang out there just to hang out there. It became a way. Became a way of life instead of staying at home and shutting ourselves in. The one in the Jerry's Deli in Studio City was connected to a bowling alley, as you recall. So you go bowling, So it's concerning that a lot of this isn't being handed down. If you go to like the Chinese, the Chinese are particularly, if you're talking like let's say the recent, mainland, that's a new immigration culture. So it's a little bit different. I'm talking about certain things where the culture of a group surpassed it. So in other words, me, Japanese American, loves to eat corned beef, loves every single Jewish deli there is, loves pickles. Uh, I'm talking about that, where, I love to get a street taco. I'm talking about that. Whereas, Chinese, I'm not saying anything lesser than, I'm just saying that for the Chinese community, everybody likes Chinese food. I mean, who doesn't like Chinese food? So basically, I'm throwing this back to you. Can you think of a situation like this, where there's like an old school restaurant that's closed and you miss it because of what it represented?
But
Well,
other than that,
I mean, I would say in Chinatown, particularly downtown near you, Chinatown had Little Joe's, the Italian old school restaurant that Tommy Lasorda used to frequent. Uh, so something like that, you had because pretty much all of Chinatown was really Little Italy. The Italian immigrants came in, then the Chinese came in, then the Italians left. So Little Joe's was part of that last of the Italian culture that came there. Well, actually, you have that deli, that East Side Deli, right? That's Italian. But Little Joe's different. You had that Italian, you know, generational thing going on. That's closed down. But I mean, but you could point to that and easily say why that closed down. It wasn't like because the Italians stopped handing stuff down to generation to generation. Because again, who doesn't like spaghetti? Who doesn't like pasta? Who doesn't like ossobuco, right? Uh, I'm talking about a situation where the generations are not adopting it. Now, I could be totally wrong, but the whole thing is that I'm not, maybe when I used to hang out at Canter's a lot after concerts on Fairfax. I used to see people my age, contemporaries, and you see them less and less, few and far between. So either they're not interested, they can't afford it. Although I don't think Cantor's is really that pricey in the scheme of things. You measure it ounce for ounce, dollar for dollar versus McDonald's. I guarantee you that Cantor's is the better deal than McDonald's. Um, but yeah, but I'm talking about, you don't see it. So either it's not being handed down in the generation, in the culture, it's too expensive, um, and just the nature of the business also. Maybe everything combined. I'll tell you something about Chinese though, is that um, which is interesting. That I'm bringing this up. Yeah, in the 1940s, like World War II, a lot of these sort of American Chinese restaurants popped up, and that's where chop suey came out. Because you right, we talked about this before. That chop suey is not a Chinese food; it's an American food.
Right.
And then what's the other one that's egg foo young? I think that's American too. So there were a lot of these Chinese American joints that weren't pure Chinese food. They were sort of Americanized Chinese food, but yet they took the form of Chinese food, so people associate that. Like for example, like I was looking for almond duck, which for those of you who had the uh the luck of growing up with it. Almond duck is this pressed duck. They take layers of duck and they press it and press it, and you have like basically 12 layers of duck, and it's crispy, and it's the best thing ever. It's got a creamy inside. It's not like regular duck, and that also, and then they pour gravy on top of that. And that's also a form of the Chinese American cuisine that happened. And then a lot of these Chinese, to my knowledge, only one such restaurant is still open. That's Paul's Kitchen in Los Angeles. That adopted the Chinese American menu early on in the 50s or 60s, I think. And actually, coincidentally, Tommy Lasorda goes there or went there because they have a Tommy Lasorda special. So that means two restaurants in 1 mile vicinity have Tommy Lasorda specials, right? The Little Joe's had it, and then the Paul's Kitchen. But yeah, I mean, can you think of other things that have disappeared? Uh, in that regard, well, I guess your dad's restaurant, the Hong Kong Low, technically was a Chinese American restaurant. It served egg foo young. It served that type of cuisine to a non-Chinese audience, correct? And they played American music, punk bands, right? So that's what you associate, and you associate those dishes with the pink imprints of the dragons flying around, and even the fortune cookie. That was invented for the Chinese American restaurant. So what happened was when you had the influence of the mainland Chinese coming in, and also the Taiwanese, well, they're separate, of course. That's when you're seeing the menus change, because I know that you were calling some places asking for almond duck, and they didn't know what the hell you were asking, because to them they don't know what it is, because these are immigrants, new immigrants, who are bringing their cuisine, and that's reflective of their cuisine, not this American hybrid. But I just remember, like, there was a restaurant like this called Gung Hei in Gardena, California, South Bay, and it was a very dark, moody. Another thing is, like, these Chinese restaurants were very dark. People like something like darkness. Because I remember there was this restaurant in Venice, or Venice, the city of Venice, called Sichuan, and it was very dark and moody. And so was this Ganghae restaurant in Gardena. It was dark and moody. You heard the lounge music playing in the background. It actually was live lounge music. Um, they had a banquet room for weddings and stuff like that. Um, Nearly identical to the same system that the Far East Cafe in Los Angeles had, which was basically a platform for a venue for weddings too. And it served this type of cuisine, this war wonton soup, this almond duck, the crispy chow mein noodles, which aren't really Chinese cuisine. That's inherent of the Chinese American bygone menu. So I'm just curious, and nobody sort of nobody sort of paid attention. I think we were sort of like blindsided. We were like, oh my gosh, like, these Chinese are coming in and they're bringing in. I've never had lobster this great in my life, or this crab, and we're forgetting about the history of the Chinese American menu, which is, that reflects the blood, sweat, and tears of the immigrant community, and the times of war when that cuisine was served all the way through the 90s, all the way through the 90s, you know?
So the actually, my dad's restaurant it did serve Cantonese cuisine.
Yeah. Well, that's
So
what I'm saying. I'm saying, yeah, it's an issue. Yeah. So what I'm getting, the Cantonese cuisine. is what came in during the 40s and the 50s, and then that was overridden by this Mandarin cuisine that came in. And what the Cantonese did, like your father, your father wasn't this isolationist. He wasn't just an immigrant that came in. He was actually intermingling with everybody, the local community people. He was bringing in non-Chinese into his restaurant. He was a personality who wore bow tie. He wore black tie all the time. He put on music. He was an entertainer. He was Sinatra. He was Chinese Sinatra. And I'm saying that whole kind of time and feeling of leisure time of going to a restaurant and listening to something is gone. Is I feel it's gone, and I don't know what's going on. All these restaurants that I go to, I mean, I could be that old. Maybe I'm that old. Who knows? But I go to these restaurants. I do not see 20-year-olds. I do not see that demographic. I do not see the 18 to even 30. No, maybe listen, and I would say like maybe I'm choosing like norms, which I'm not. I'm choosing diners, I'm choosing contemporary Italian restaurants, and I'm not saying, um now we know that the birth rate's down, so we know that, typically families would take out kids to meals and stuff, and so maybe that's not that. Maybe something happened during COVID. Well, obviously COVID happened, so we don't see, we're not seeing these kids. We missed a gap during COVID, so we're not seeing these 4 and 5-year-olds, out in force. Um, Also, yeah, sorry about that. Dog was barking. No, no, just kidding. Um, also, what sort of became stunted in terms of growth was the influx of European immigrants to this country, because during the 60s and 70s, they came in for, well, they came for a lot of reasons. I mean, industrialization. So they came in for car companies, like German car companies. They came in for some pharmaceuticals, that type of thing. And as a result, I don't know what the numbers are, like how many Germans or Italians or French there were. Um,
I think that time I went inside like once or twice. Yeah, like I think I said before, it had like sawdust on the floor, just like Philippe. But other than that, yeah, I can't remember that well. So, Joe's restaurant there in Chinatown
yeah, yeah, yeah.
used
And
to
then, and
be
then what happened
also.
was is like what happened was during the 50s and 60s, there was an influx of European immigrants to the country. I don't actually have data and research on it. I don't. I'm assuming they came in for like automotive businesses and finances, because there were some banks owned by Europeans here. Uh, banking and pharma. So they came in, and so as a result, you saw like in these areas where they were strong, like say for example, like Germans, you'd see these German markets pop up. These little sort of small supermarkets, the kind you'd see in Europe, where a little old lady would slice meat for you, give you some bread that they've made. They've made some sausage. Here's some mustard. Here's some cabbage and sauerkraut, and it's great. And a lot of those markets are gone. There was a German small little village here called Alpine Village, and every year they do Oktoberfest and have a big swap meet. But they had a huge German market, every single sausage, German candies, you name it, canned fish, and they're gone too. Um, and I think that's not so much a case of like the younger generation or the younger Europeans, adopting that culture. I mean, it is to a certain extent. I just think that the influx of the immigration from Europe sort of slowed down considerably during the 80s, when the focus was on bringing more service workers in. So, people from South America, Latin America, the Philippines for the nursing industry and stuff like that. And then certainly the 90s was the influx of East Indians for the tech sector. So, so the dearth or the demise of like the European markets was really because of the lack of the slowing down the influx of the immigrants, not so much the fact that their kids weren't accepting of it. So
Can talk about
No,
politics.
I mean, the one who curated this was Huell Hauser, because he could go to these places and say, "Hey, I'm at Johnny's Pastrami, or I'm at Pink's. Come here, take a look," and he'd do it justice. You know, he enjoyed those little moments of life when you could eat a hot dog at Pink's and wait in line and talk to the owner and talk to your neighbor, and that's just not there anymore. You know, I don't really know what generations do. I don't know what they do if they don't go out. Uh, you know, they're not buying music, they're on some sort of subscription. Okay, they're going to concerts, I'll give you that. But I mean, what are they doing? Okay, they get a car. Um, I mean, it's like, you know, they got you know, they have their devices, but I mean, I don't see them really traveling. If they travel, it's more like a nomad, which is basically a statement that they're sort of against what the tradition's been in generations before them. They live cheaper. They learn to be cheaper, to live and be cheaper. I think that they feel left down by the system, more or less, because the system's told you, like, okay, well, you know, go get your PhD and you're guaranteed six figures a year. And so they did that. They worked their butt off, and they found themselves to be 26 years old. And then what are you going to do? They didn't get their job, or they didn't get in. Things are rapidly changing in terms of requirements, DEI, affirmative action. And I just see a lot of these qualified and qualified people trying to enter the workforce, and they just can't, and they get just, you know, there's no escapism for them. You know, how can you justify now eating a $40 prime rib dish, you know,
Right.
when you're not making that an hour, you know? Uh You know, so we know it because ad dollars are dropping. Ad dollars are dropping across the board, and obviously it trickles down to us. Like, for example, they go to like Tubi or Amazon, and you know, Target or Walmart and there, whoever. Was that insurance company with Flow?
Aggressive.
Progressive, yeah. They go, hey, we have 10 million to spend, hit this demographic, just hit it. And then, you know, in doing so, it sort of rules out our kind of films, because our films for a different are for a different demographic, and the demographic that they want is getting smaller, and it's spreading out and morphing. It's constantly being chameleonic, morphing into something, you know, that is not there anymore, and literally, you know, the person that you want to approach for ads is someone that is someone that really doesn't have the sort of idle hobby dollar to spend on, you know. And I know hobby sounds sort of extravagant, like, you know, a hobby is a horse, or hobby's golfing, you know, whatever. But I'm talking a hobby is like buying a DVD, is buying a Blu-ray. That's a hobby now. And I'm saying people don't even have the budget or the money to do that. And you know, I don't know, like, you know, I know that we're getting more transparent as ever as a country and as a world. You know, I'd be curious to see just how much of the American people are on some sort of social program to get them through, and then what percentage even have a job, and you know, or have a degree that gets you somewhere, and then it's not getting you anywhere. It's, you know, and then what do you do next? Because I mean, you know, where interest rates aren't going down. Uh, there's still volatility in the stock market, but people are making money, you know, betting on bloodshed here and there, and they're making tons and tons of money. But that's, you know, that's not for you and I. You know, that's not a playing field that you and I can get involved with. You know, because what these people are doing is they're shifting trillions of dollars, they're shifting billions here and there, and you can do that. You know, if you throw a billion, it just sits here. You know, you're making how much per day at the you know, at the way the market's been going, and you throw some in sort of some bonds for security and stuff like that. But I mean, just sitting it, and this is wealth that's amassed over generations. I mean, probably turn of the century. Well, I mean, right around the time when Ellis Island, the immigrants brought whatever they had. I mean, which was nothing, but they quickly set up shop. The enterprising ones quickly set up shop. That's the one thing, is that the Europeans learned very much how to set up these sort of self-sustaining mom and pop, organizations that didn't rely on anybody else, because first and foremost they're going into unknown territory, and first and foremost they had, their objective is to protect their family. So what better is there if there's a mom and pop situation that you can run and control, and provide survivalhood for your family, and that's, for example, why immigrants um wandered off and created the film industry. They all came here through Ellis Island, and then they all did the whole theater thing. But then, the Pathé came out with photographic, the Lumiere came out with photographic materials, and then the medium of storytelling, changed a bit. But it's really just like a group of tight um businessmen that started Hollywood on the East Coast before it migrated it here. It was a sector that nobody wanted to get involved with. They didn't have the credence to get involved into the financial world. Although they would soon get involved, just by nature of movies becoming successful. This new medium at some point became extremely successful. Um, but it was a sector that was new, that they had invented for themselves. And around that time, turn of the century, most of the stuff already had been established. I mean, infrastructural systems, agricultural. A lot of this had been already developed. So, when you come into this country, what do you have to offer to bring to the table? And fortunately, the European immigrants were all educated in classical literature and theater and music, and they were able to bring this artistry to whatever it is that they participated in. And because the immigrants, they would they couldn't really get into mainstream fields like medical, whatever medical there was then, but certainly, nothing that the ruling class or the people of status would allow. So they sort of had this thing on the side that became this major thing that it became influential. And the value of the media and the image changes from agenda to agenda, and a lot of that's affected by the administrations. Like, how much they want to weaponize it to get what they need to steer a certain agenda. I mean, most of the time, historically, it's all been about creating a mass hysteria to people. I mean, it's been in books, but especially media now, because it's all over, this fear, and I mean, this wanting to be distant. I mean, gosh, I can't even believe, like, the number of tributes for Robert Redford. I mean, have you seen much anything going on? Like, I don't, I mean, you would think a legend of that caliber, that there would just be like ongoing processions and remembrances. But I mean, I've seen maybe a couple. What about you?
On the internet, let's see, like just the news reports. I didn't really watch TV about those reports, but yeah, just like daily variety website, Hollywood Reporter, or CNN, just the website, yeah, the reporter on it. So
Oh yeah,
just
yeah,
one
yeah.
more
But
thing.
you know what I mean. There's no, I mean, they don't even play. Well, TV stations don't sign off anymore. But when they used to sign off at 4 a.m., or I forget when they used to sign off, 4 a.m. or 3 a.m. Remember, they used to play Star Spangled Banner, and all of that. And
Yeah, I can't remember.
yeah, and just like tradition, remembrance, symbolism, and that's not symbol, but remembrance is sort of gone. And I don't know. COVID basically depersonified death. Because we couldn't see our loved ones that were dying. We never saw, first of all, we never saw them while they were dying, when they needed us at their most. We never saw them after they died. And we really never saw them at all. I mean, there was no burials. Burials had to be, it was a very I mean, it's hard to think it was only 4 years ago, 5 years ago that when all that was, but there's just sort of this desensitization, uh, of our connection to feelings. A lot of that is death just is saying, "Okay, see," 'cause I think the feeling is that we're supposed to keep moving on in whatever productive form that the agenda's been set for us. So something like death, you know, in terms of making us appreciate life and remember more, something like death turns us in a negative direction. Because you got to remember that a lot of people are living psychologically on the edge now because they're coming from a time when all of when the rug was yanked from under them 5 years ago, and they lost connection to people, and they lost their emotions, and they lost and the brain's a very malleable thing. It takes time to adjust. It takes months, years, and so the years during COVID really desensitized how we approach things like emotions and death and what we consider touchy things. I began to sort of see it when I noticed people breaking up their relationships over texts. Like, we shouldn't talk anymore, bye, or everybody doxing each other, saying what's really on their mind, but doxing each other on Facebook or Twitter instead of saying it to somebody and having a meaningful conversation. Because we didn't know how to react. I mean, I don't know how many people you saw during COVID. I mean, I know we were making movies, but it was still under limited controlled circumstances. We had maybe 5 people on the set. So we weren't really interacting with people. We were interacting with ghosts and everybody else around town, in these empty ghost towns. So getting out of it, no, getting out of it. I mean, I don't know when we officially got out of it. Was it 2022, 2023? I do you remember what year it was?
Approximately, yeah, around that time, I guess.
Yeah, but what year
2020.
was it though? Well,
Uh,
okay, I mean, yeah, so 20, okay, so 2022. So Biden, um, at that time, I think that these sort of rehabilitation programs should have come into play. Instead of just throwing money out to the open, everybody like, here's 5,000, here's 2,000, here's three, and everybody, not knowing what to do with it. So saying, hey, let's go to Vegas. And then it's gone like, oh, what did I do? What did I do? I really think that there needed to be some sort of rehabilitation of the psyche, of the mind for for people, like even voluntary, like, there's this stigma that psychology and psychiatry is like something's wrong with you. And a lot of that's depicted because there were times when, the medical world, you know, was at odds with different agendas, and labels were used. It was easy to say someone's psycho instead of saying someone, is dealing with a little bit level of anxiety. And a lot of it is some of it's genetic, a lot of it's societal, where you live in, what happens to your family. Like if your best friend was murdered in front of you, you would be different than somebody whose, best friend drives a Porsche. I don't know. Well, actually, you wouldn't want to be that friend. um. And so here we are, like 2 or 3 years later, and I remember certain things like click of events, like, okay, we are officially out of this craziness. Okay, people are trying to get back together, but they're struggling with their life. I get it. I get it. And it really took a full 2 years for that. And by the way, we're still not healed. I think it opened up more wounds, and you know, much internal hemorrhaging has occurred and is still going on that we're not acknowledging because we're in denial a lot. So we choose to shut it out. You don't even know what to think because everyone's in denial of death and whatever, and also, one agenda is to remember people, in a spiritual way, be positive about life and what they brought in their legacy. And then there's the other more, let's say, pessimistic or nihilistic form, which is to say that, if death is constantly around us, then by virtue of that fact, we're desensitized by it. So it's easy to go down the path of death, and it's easy to condone, or I don't. Oh, I don't. I mean, no, I don't think anybody ever condones any killing. But let's just say killing's going on, and we're continuing our shopping.
You seem to be right. Yeah, we shouldn't condone shouldn't support killing. That's of course that's very wrong. Of course that's wrong. Of course. So try to promote peace,
I
and
was hogging the conversation. I had to cut myself mid sentence off. Yeah.
so
um. Yeah, so I don't know how we ended up from declining and restaurants have gone by era to death after COVID.
well,
But we
yeah,
somehow
you're
have
right.
gone off that tangent, and that's as easily just like real life. One thing takes you down a rabbit hole on Google or Twitter or YouTube. Everybody knows your viewing habits. They're getting good at predicting. You
You're
know,
right.
and but this predicting system, something that's been going on and it's not perfected, but we knew going on early on. And I'm going to go into like a series of like distribution chapters, not so much like a seminar, but just sort of my experiences, and I will touch upon new subjects like in terms of how distribution is now versus then, and how you can navigate on the new playing field, which is incredibly, you know, uh, how should we say it? One of complete turmoil. Um, but we'll go into that as well. But part of this was, go ahead, Ward. Now you're talking.
Yeah, complex turmoil. Right.
What?
Um, the turmoil, complex distribution you're talking about.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, it is. You're right. It's complicated. All these different streaming services and well, entertainment has changed. Lots of different choices. So it's not the same as before, of course. So no more, no more DVDs, not as many Blu-rays, there's more people streaming. So movie theaters, yeah, business gone down. Not as many hits, box office hits. The box office gone down. Not as many, not doing it overall as well. So you're right. So,
uh, yeah. And usually in times like this, when there's a disaster, people use art as an expression. Especially when there's repression involved, like out of the Cold War, there were a lot of these Eastern European artists and filmmakers who made movies that were symbolically about the authoritarian regimes and so forth, because it was their only way of expressing it. And Iran, some of the earlier Iran cinemas very much like that. Under Khomeini, they were very repressed, and they had to do, I mean, they still are to a certain extent. So, but
movie business, not always that successful, not as good as before. So also TV too. It seems like broadcast TV, gone down. People try to watch streaming services more often compared to broadcast network TV.
yeah.
We have a lot more choices before. So
Well, anyway, as I was saying, I'm gonna try to attempt, so long as I get people, there's interest. I'm gonna do a series of these sort of distribution podcasts, these episodes, and they're not really seminars. Like, I'm not telling you to do one thing or another. I'm just telling you, I'm gonna talk about my experience as it relates to how I see what's going on now in the distribution world. And I will get into nitty gritty, like how I see the evolving of different ways to market and the costs involved, the different contracts, the mediums, the people. Um, the sort of disturbing free for all most of all. So I'll go, I will certainly go into that down the road. But anyway, I was saying, so yeah, so as COVID, like, yeah, we got out of it, and I feel like there should have been these really rehabilitative programs, which there weren't for psychology. I know a lot of people that never got out of it. PTSD is a big thing, and one of my colleagues in high school committed suicide just like last year. So like 2 years after COVID, and it takes time for repercussion. Like COVID, you lost everything, but it was all the things that came to a standstill. It was like, you must do this, you can't go this, you can't go here, you can't do this. It was a standstill of time, which is what they wanted. They wanted not a reset, but to freeze time so that we could control what it was that was going on. Unfortunately, it became weaponized, but you know, but that's not another show. Um, but anyway, yeah. So then, I think around like 2023 or 2024, I saw in earnest some friends and people that I knew that were really trying to make a go of this whole game in movie production and distribution, and struggling because everything had been rewritten. You know, but I mean, obviously, the lowest common denominator was cash, because the COVID wiped out ad reserves. It wiped out our consumer spending, and it takes the filmmaker to reacquaint themselves. There's something I'll go into. This is not this show, but the filmmaker needs to sort of reorient his mind into the fact that he is selling to a consumer, and not the consumer who that would want his film necessarily, if you know what I mean. Like, if I do a horror film, yeah, I want horror fans to see it, but I'm trying to sell it to people who buy stuff at Target and Walmart, so that Walmart and Target will get more money, and it flows back into the economy. They'll bump their ads up, and in turn the money trickles back to us, so we could keep making films and try to keep our people in jobs as much as we can. Uh, so yeah, so that's an issue that I will talk about in another one. So, but on that note, is there anything you want to wrap up with? I'm trying to think. We hardly. I mean, I don't know that we really cracked the surface on anything about the loss of generational. I think is the Dresden room in Los Feliz. That's an old school. The Derby is still around in Monrovia, but it's renovated. But still, the Derby's been there since the 30s. The old Derby's closed, the one that was on Hollywood. Um, I heard they took on the Arby's sign on Hollywood Boulevard that
Hollywood,
had been there for 50 years, right? That's gone.
Sunset Boulevard.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So there's there's a lot of that is just sort of dried up, and as I like studying people and their habits and how they change, and you'll hear me talk more about sociology more than movies than anything on these podcasts, because people interest me, and it's very curious what society and societal factors do to a person, and what make them become um the way they are, and whether that's something that's psychological, as we talked about, like different segments of society that you're from, whether were you born here, what's your education, are you married, what's your gender, what's your race, um you know and things keep changing daily around the world, with belligerents, who see fit to keep changing their positions back and forth, and what is that doing to the person? I like to say the proletariat, but I don't want to sound like I'm socialist, because I'm not. But but the proletariat is the person that has no control over the power. It's the ruling class, but proletariat has a service to sell, and he's He's the life and blood of your cavalry, you know, the proletariat. So yeah, that sounds ridiculous. Okay, okay. um, okay, well, to be continued. I don't know if anyone's listening to this by now, but yeah, I do want to say like you'll see the lack of formatting is great because we'll just wake up right now. It's like 2 a.m. and Warren and I will just say, hey, well, what about that corned beef place? Let's do a show on that. And you know, it's natural we're going to go off on tangents and things like that. But you know, there might be somebody looking at 2 a.m. one night saying, well, you know, wasn't there a pastrami? Wasn't there a good Jewish deli in LA? You know? So, by the way, I haven't been to Factors. Factors in West LA is a good one. I think that's still around. Factors. And then of course you have Canters. Um, I don't know what else. Oh, Arts Deli. Arts is good.
Yeah, Art Gallery.
Yeah. I
Uncle
hope
Bernie.
Tony I hope Tony's still there. Uncle Bernie's, yeah, I hope Tony's, yeah, yeah. But again, these are places that are open for breakfast and lunch and then they close like at 2 o'clock. So I mean it's a shame, you know. I mean, I recall going into like Arts Deli at 10 p.m. and having a you know, brisket dip. You know, that never happened today. It's just people aren't going out. I don't know where they're going. They're not going in the theaters because I go and they're empty. I was the only one seeing Sound of Music the other night. And I kid you not, on Fandango, the ticket said like 4 tickets sold. So what are these phantom people? I get trying to fill the seats, but what are these phantom people? And it wasn't like they canceled it either. When I came there, it said 4 seats had been sold already. So nobody was there. And I
Yeah,
left at the intermission because there's no more songs after the, well, there are, but they're reprisals of the earlier songs. So basically, all the songs that you want, like favorite things, Do Re Mi, Edelweiss, that's all in the first act, and that first act comes in at I think it comes at the 101 minute mark, and then there's an intermission, which they showed the intermission and the interact, and then I left, because then the rest is this sort of fight with Nazis and stuff, and then they have to escape and sing "Climb Every Mountain." Okay.
yeah.
Ciao.